Have you ever found yourself wondering truly where lasting success comes from? Is it pure grit and grind, or is there something more at play, something beyond our immediate control? Today, we're taking a deep dive into some really fascinating perspectives on wealth, effort, and what it really means to build something enduring. We're doing this by exploring a rich collection of biblical teachings that you've provided.
Yeah, we've been handed this fascinating set of insights. They weave together ancient wisdom with, well, surprising echoes in modern-day experiences. These sources explore themes of what they describe as divine sovereignty over wealth, the often transient nature of human-built profit, and, the sometimes uncomfortable realities of unequal distribution.
Okay. So our goal here isn't really to endorse these specific viewpoints as universal truth, right? It's more to impartially unpack the powerful ideas within these ancient texts. We want to see how they might challenge or illuminate, or maybe just offer a unique lens for you to view your own journey and understanding of success. Okay, let's unpack this. So our sources kick off with a foundational principle that really challenges our common understanding of achievement. It's this idea that wealth, poverty, and, well, everything in between ultimately fall under some kind of sovereign control. It really pushes back against that common notion we all hold that, our power and our strength alone are what get us our wealth.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? The texts consistently propose that there's a higher hand involved. In the extent and timing of material blessings, books like Deuteronomy and Samuel, they directly dismantle this idea of purely self-made success. For instance, Deuteronomy 8, verses 17 to 18, explicitly warns against that pride of thinking, my power and the strength of my hand have gained me this wealth. Instead, it suggests that our intellect, our opportunities, even our physical strength are ultimately gifts.
Gifts. Wow. That's a profound challenge to our, deeply ingrained notion of self-made success if our own power isn't the ultimate source. Well, how does that shift our perspective on personal ambition and the sheer effort we put in?
It reframes everything, really.
Yeah.
The book of First Samuel is even more direct. It states, the Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. So this perspective implies that wealth and poverty aren't simply accidents. They reflect purposes that maybe transcend our human understanding. Then Proverbs adds this fascinating distinction about the nature of different riches. It speaks of the blessing of the Lord bringing wealth without sorrow, suggesting a kind of peace-filled prosperity, which stands in stark contrast to riches pursued outside of what the texts consider a divine blessing. Those often come with anxiety or emptiness, even when they look successful on the outside.
So it's not just if you get rich, but how you get rich, and maybe what kind of richness it is.
Exactly. And then you have Ecclesiastes with its often existential tone. It further complicates our typical understanding of success. It observes, the race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor yet riches to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. Now, while diligence and skill certainly matter, this viewpoint suggests that ultimately an overarching providence can override human factors. Similarly, the Psalms hint that even things like career breakthroughs or promotions, they're seen as ultimately being, well, God's call, rather than solely a result of human effort or connections.
Okay, so when we look at all these ancient texts together, what are the practical implications that emerge for us today? What's the takeaway?
The implications are quite significant, actually. Firstly, these sources suggest that human effort, while absolutely essential, isn't. Well, it isn't absolute. Diligence is consistently encouraged. You must work hard. But the ultimate arrival of wealth and success, from this perspective, happens when and as a divine power permits. Secondly, riches are framed as a stewardship, not absolute ownership. If wealth is seen as coming from a divine source, it inherently carries this deep responsibility for, generosity, humility, and service to others. And finally, the texts consistently warn that pride is a dangerous path. Attributing success solely to oneself within this framework leads to a kind of spiritual error, causing one to forget the ultimate source of all blessings.
It's really remarkable how these ancient principles still resonate today. Let's think about some present-day scenarios that really bring these truths to life.
Indeed. Think about, say, two equally qualified job seekers. Both are brilliant, excel in their studies, interview really well for similar roles. Yet one lands a high-paying job almost immediately, while the other struggles for months to find something comparable. Our human logic often points to luck or networking, right? But these sources would likely attribute it to divine timing and favor, a factor beyond our immediate human control. Or consider two entrepreneurs. One launches a business with integrity, works tirelessly, and it grows steadily. Another, with an identical model and similar tireless efforts, struggles and ultimately fails. This situation really echoes that sentiment in Proverbs that the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps, suggesting an unseen hand in the outcome.
Right, those invisible threads influencing our path.
Precisely. And even something like health and ability plays a part here. You might observe someone who earns millions but then loses their health, becoming unable to actually enjoy their wealth. Meanwhile, another person lives a more moderate life but enjoys profound peace and good health. This connects to Ecclesiastes 5.14, which proposes that even the ability to truly enjoy wealth is considered a gift from a higher power. Makes you really think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much of our success can we truly claim is purely self-made?
Yeah, absolutely. And building on that thought, these sources introduce another powerful idea that all that human hustle, those late nights, the smart investments, they often build profit, sure, but not necessarily permanence. It's like building a beautiful grand structure, but on shifting sands.
It's a profound illusion, and these ancient foundations really work to dismantle it. Proverbs 23.4-5, for example, offers this vivid warning against toiling just for wealth. It says it is gone, for suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven. That's not a condemnation of work itself, right? It's more a caution against an obsessive pursuit of wealth, highlighting how fleeting it can be. And we see this powerfully illustrated in the life of King Solomon. Despite amassing immense wealth, building magnificent palaces, he later expressed in Ecclesiastes 2, verses 18-19, that he hated all my toil, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, to one who has not labored for it. He was an empire builder,
Concerned.
well, almost an existentialist, pondering the ultimate transience of his hard-won achievements.
An empire builder questioning it all, that's quite a profound insight into the human condition, isn't it? Absolutely. And Ecclesiastes 5.10L11 describes what it calls the hunger loop. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. This concept of vanity, or hevel, it's a powerful Hebrew word, it literally means vapor or breath, suggests that our grand blueprints for billions can be as insubstantial and fleeting as, like, a wisp of smoke without a deeper anchored purpose. It's a vivid image how quickly earthly gains can just dissipate. Then Proverbs 13.11 offers a counter-rhythm. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it, which is basically the wisdom of the tortoise versus the hare.
And this idea of impermanence wasn't just in the Old Testament. Even Jesus in these sources echoed similar warnings, didn't he?
Indeed. In Luke 12, verses 16-21, you have the parable of the rich fool. It paints this picture of a successful individual focused solely on building bigger barns for his harvests, only to hear this profound and sobering statement from God. Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? It's a stark reminder of life's unpredictable nature. Similarly, Matthew 6 advises against laying up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. It suggests that earthly treasures are inherently subject to depreciation, decay, while those aligned with a spiritual purpose are seen as more enduring.
It's striking how modern these ancient texts feel, almost like they predicted the relentless pursuit of success in our, fast-paced gig economy world. What's fascinating here is how these themes echo in our current world.
They truly do. I mean, consider the modern hedonic treadmill, that concept from psychology, where promotions just fund fancier lifestyles, leading to bigger mortgages, flashier car leases. You're constantly running just to maintain a lifestyle that ultimately consumes your wealth, much like that hunger loop. Or think back to the rapid rise and fall of certain cryptocurrency fortunes. Those stories of overnight millionaires only to see billions wiped out in a crash, it perfectly illustrates that wealth gained hastily will dwindle from Proverbs. Even in the daily grind, a barista clocking 60-hour weeks for a small raise might be building profit, sure, but from this perspective, maybe at the expense of true permanence, leading to burnout, regrets about neglected relationships, or health.
Yeah, the cost for that profit can be incredibly high.
Yes. And recent tech layoffs, for example, showed how even supposedly smart portfolios or seemingly secure careers can suddenly just vanish, leaving people watching as eaters, like alimony, daily expenses, just devour what was built. Even C-suite executives, stacking stock options, can retire with a nest egg that gets eroded by healthcare costs or market whims. That average 401k balance for 55, 64-year-olds, while it sounds substantial, can quickly feel like vapor when you adjust for inflation and longevity. And on a global scale, think about micro-entrepreneurs in emerging markets who build little by little but then face coups, pandemics, floods, constant reminders that without a deeper anchor, there's no guaranteed permanence for their efforts.
So how do these seemingly small little actions in our daily lives or even inactions contribute to this slow corrosion of what these sources call the unanchored hustle?
Well, it often starts subtly, doesn't it? Like a harmless overtime shift taken to buy a new gadget. That can snowball into consistently skipped family dinners, slowly neglecting vital relationships. Or hasty photo-driven investments in, say, meme stocks, leading to panic sells and tax hits, entirely bypassing necessary due diligence. As our goods multiply the fancy home, the least EV, so do the eaters associated with them. Higher HOA fees, more subscriptions, the pressure to keep up with status-driven friends. These sources suggest our heart can subtly shift earthward, kind of blinding us to what they consider more enduring heavenly deposits, like charitable giving or mentoring others. Even daily habits like constant financial news alerts on your phone can fuel an unhealthy focus on money. While snapping at a colleague might be a subconscious way of defending your empire at the expense of genuine connection.
And what about the things we don't do? The inactions?
Precisely. Neglecting community, like maybe ghosting a small group meeting or skipping a volunteer commitment because of hustle time, that allows those vital connections to atrophy. Consider Sarah, a fictional marketing manager in Austin. She grinds for gigs, lands a remote side hustle that's profit, but she skips yoga, ignores her kids' soccer games, leading to relational drift. Then, a client flakes, and her supposedly diversified freelance portfolio crumbles. She might build a down payment for a forever home, only for burnout to land her in therapy. Or Jamal in Chicago, flipping sneakers online, gaining profits, but then a widespread scam wave hits. Sudden loss, trust shattered. From the perspective of these sources, he might realize he hasn't truly acknowledged what they call a divine power behind his success, as Deuteronomy warns.
Wow, this really brings home the idea that our daily choices can have these profound long-term consequences way beyond just our bank balance. So what's the ultimate implication here? What's the moral of this part of our deep dive?
The core implication is this: hard work does build profit. These sources suggest we are kind of wired for it, like Genesis 2.15 describes Adam tending the garden. But permanence, from this perspective, is presented as a divine promise, not something guaranteed by our paycheck alone. The vanity isn't work itself, but rather worshiping its fruits. When one aligns their efforts with what these sources call a heavenly purpose, profit then becomes a tool for what they consider eternity, rather than just, a sandcastle built merely for show.
Okay, shifting gears a bit now, our sources also delve into one of Jesus' most challenging teachings, the parable of the talents. This parable really forces us to confront what these texts describe as the uncomfortable truth of divine distribution in an often unequal world.
Yeah, the core concept of this parable, found in Matthew 25, reveals that what these sources call God distributes gifts, opportunities, and outcomes. Well, not based on human notions of equality, but on a divine assessment, each according to his ability. This divine assessment principle, as we might call it, is supported elsewhere too. For example, 1 Corinthians asks rhetorically, "What do you have that you did not receive?" When plus, Romans notes, "We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us." And 1 Corinthians emphasizes that the Spirit distributes them to each one just as he determines.
So from this perspective, it's all attributed to grace, all divine determination, not earned merit in the human sense.
Exactly. And even in the Old Testament narratives, you see instances like God choosing Jacob over Esau, or elevating Joseph, or anointing David. These selections are consistently presented as not based on human merit, but on what these sources call divine prerogative. This leads us to what some might find an uncomfortable reality, what these sources refer to as predestination, or at least divine foreknowledge. Passages in Ephesians and Jeremiah suggest that what they call God's purposes transcend our human understanding. Proverbs 16.9 notes, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." From this viewpoint, a person's ceiling, so to speak, may be predetermined. The individual given one talent isn't necessarily cursed, but simply operating within what's described as a divinely assigned capacity.
This concept of divine distribution where outcomes aren't based on human equality, that can be quite challenging, can't it? Especially in a world like ours that deeply values fairness and equal opportunity. How do these sources guide us to reconcile this tension, or maybe just to understand the broader purpose behind such an unequal distribution from their perspective?
That's an essential question. These sources present a principle found right there in Matthew 25.29, often referred to as divine amplification. For whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them. Now, this principle appears repeatedly in the New Testament. It's generally interpreted not as being about judging inherent worth, but about faithful stewardship of whatever has been given. We see it in biblical examples like Solomon's wisdom, which, from this perspective, led to even more wealth, and David's kingdom, which grew from his faithful stewardship of smaller responsibilities earlier on. Even the story of the widow's oil in 2 Kings demonstrates it. Elisha multiplied what little she had, but she had to faithfully pour what she possessed first, utilizing what was already in her hands.
So how does this concept, this amplification principle, play out in modern society, here in, say, 2025?
Well, we can definitely observe echoes of this principle in many contemporary scenarios. Take the technology amplification effect. Imagine 2 equally qualified software developers starting their careers back in 2010. Developer A joins Google early. Their stock options make them a millionaire. Developer B joins a promising startup that ultimately fails. You could argue identical effort, maybe similar skill, but vastly unequal results based on external circumstances. What these sources might frame as divine providence or simply time and chance. Then there are things like educational advantages. A child born into a family of doctors often inherits cultural capital, networking opportunities, a built-in safety net. An equally intelligent child born into poverty might face food insecurity, inadequate schools, maybe even trauma. From this perspective, one is given 5 talents. The other one, based on circumstances, not necessarily inherent worth.
It's the ovarian lottery Warren Buffett talked about, essentially, that idea of starting advantages.
Precisely. And network effects in wealth building are another clear modern application. Entrepreneurs' success often comes not just from their brilliance or hard work, but from access to venture capital, elite university connections, family safety nets, or cultural environments that foster innovation. These are significant advantages that, frankly, no amount of pure personal effort could manufacture on its own. It really makes you think about all the factors beyond our individual control, doesn't it?
It really does. It's almost like success can compound, not just financially, but in so many aspects of life for those who are initially given more. What about the little actions in our daily lives that might mirror this principle of divine distribution and amplification?
These principles can play out through daily compound effects, too. Consider reading habits. A child who learns to read early and has ready access to books accumulates knowledge that compounds over a lifetime. Often, that's due more to accessible circumstances than superior morality. Health advantages can also compound. Good genetics combined with a healthy upbringing can lead to a lifetime of compounding health benefits and social connections. Naturally extroverted people often build networks more easily, which can lead to multiplying career opportunities and support systems down the line. This really highlights the stewardship principle in daily life as presented in these sources. Think about it. A person earning $30,000 who consistently saves 10% demonstrates perhaps a different kind of faithfulness with their allocation than a person earning $100,000 who saves nothing. Similarly, a person with modest abilities who consistently works to improve shows what these sources might call better stewardship than a naturally gifted person who maybe wastes their potential.
This makes me wonder, from the perspective of these sources, about the types of actions that either reflect this truth of unequal distribution or maybe resist it.
Yeah, on the positive side, what we might call positive stewardship actions would include faithfully using your current resources, whatever they are, continuous learning and personal development, generous giving, mentorship, maybe those with 5 talents, investing in those with 1. Conversely, destructive patterns, which are reminiscent of the servant who buried his talent in the parable, would include things like comparison and resentment towards others' allocations, excessive risk avoidance that keeps talents unused, a sense of entitlement, perhaps, or even despair over one's perceived limited capacity. This perspective really does reshape our usual understanding of fairness, effort, and what success truly means.
Okay, we've covered a lot. This idea of divine sovereignty, the transient nature of profit, and what these sources describe as divine, often unequal, distribution. This can definitely bring up a lot of questions for you listening. For instance, many might wonder, does this mean I shouldn't work hard if, from this perspective, God decides everything anyway?
That's a very common and really important question, and the answer, drawing from these scriptures, is a resounding no. The Bible consistently calls for diligence. Proverbs 10.4, for instance, says, "The hand of the diligent makes rich." Diligence, from this viewpoint, works under divine providence, not against it. In fact, 2 Thessalonians 3.10 even states pretty bluntly, "If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." So it's not about being passive at all. It's more about motive. Hustle for provision, to fulfill your given purpose, maybe, but not just for the accumulation of possessions.
Right. What about those who remain poor? A listener might ask, why would God allow some to remain poor? And doesn't this perspective maybe justify inequality or discourage helping those in need?
Another crucial point. These sources suggest poverty can serve various purposes, perhaps fostering humility or greater dependence on what they call God, as James 2.5 notes. It's also not always presented as permanent, nor is wealth always presented as a direct reward for righteousness.
Mhm.
And importantly, these scriptures consistently and emphatically command care for the poor. Deuteronomy 15.1, Matthew 25.40. These are just two examples highlighting this mandate. So while this teaching seeks to explain why inequality might exist from a divine perspective, it simultaneously demands a compassionate and active response from believers to alleviate suffering and injustice.
Okay, and given this concept of a potentially predetermined ceiling or this unequal distribution, how does one maintain motivation and drive? How do you keep going?
The focus, according to these texts, shifts significantly. It moves away from comparison with others and towards faithfulness with what you've been given. 1 Corinthians 4.2 reminds believers that they're ultimately judged on how they steward their specific allocation, not on achieving identical results to someone else. And Colossians 3.23 encourages, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, emphasizing that the quality of your effort and the heart behind it matters most, regardless of the scale of the outcome.
Does this perspective suggest that God dislikes wealth itself? Is being wealthy inherently bad?
Not at all, based on these texts. Many significant biblical figures were wealthy, yet considered righteous, think Abraham, Job, Solomon initially. These sources generally warn against the love of wealth more than what they call God. That's the key distinction. 1 Timothy 6.0 makes it clear, stating the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, not money itself.
Okay, that makes sense. How can someone trying to apply these principles maybe spot when their desire for gain might be derailing their larger purpose or plans?
From this perspective, you'd look for red flags like sleeplessness over stock market fluctuations. That kind of anxiety is contrasted in Philippians 4.6 with a trusting peace. Or maybe noticing if your joy in acquiring things begins to noticeably outweigh your joy in relationships or in what these sources call God. A practical action these sources might suggest, maybe a weekly audit. Ask yourself, did this week's hustle serve a purpose beyond purely earthly gain? A key antidote they present to derailing desire is honoring periods of rest, like the Sabbath, which is framed as essential for preventing that hunger loop and maintaining perspective.
And what if a recession hits? Does this perspective still hold true during economic downturns?
Doubly so, I'd say. During a recession, hasty panics can cause wealth to dwindle even faster, really echoing Proverbs 13.11 about hasty gains. These sources would advise building little by little, emphasizing things like a foundational emergency fund first. And the book of Job offers such a powerful perspective here. Job 1.21, his famous response to losing everything. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. It's a profound reminder from this viewpoint to find peace and trust in a higher giver, even when things are taken away.
Wow, those insights really provide a robust framework for understanding these pretty challenging topics. Okay, let's wrap up with the key insights from this deep dive into these sources.
Absolutely. Here are some core insights to carry with you, drawn from these ancient texts. 1. Wealth is presented as ultimately coming from a divine source. Your effort matters, yes, but divine favor is depicted as decisive. 2. Blessings, from this perspective, carry responsibility. They suggest using wealth to honor what they call God and to help others. 3. Humility is key. Success in this framework is never purely self-made. It's seen as divinely enabled. 4. Try to trust in divine timing. Delays or closed doors are sometimes framed as reflecting a larger divine plan, even if unseen. 5. Focus on stewardship and the faithful use of your allocation. Maximize the gifts you've been given, rather than getting caught up comparing your outcomes to others. 6. Remember, profit might be a prelude, not the punchline. Permanence is presented as God's promise, not our paycheck's guarantee. 7. Divine distribution, as described here, transcends human ideas of fairness. Our role is faithful stewardship, not demanding equal outcomes. And 8. Following from that, focus on your allocation. Maximize the faithful use of your specific gifts rather than comparing.
Okay, that's a great summary. So how do we apply these powerful insights to our daily lives right now? What are some concrete actions you listening might consider based on these principles?
Okay, from the perspective of these sources, here are a few actionable ideas to think about. If you're, say, starting a business, maybe you consciously pray first, then plan next, rather than relying solely on your own acumen. If a promotion is delayed, these texts might suggest trusting in divine timing while still continuing to stay diligent and excellent in your work. If you get some unexpected income, maybe consider principles of tithing, saving, and helping others before immediately upgrading your lifestyle. If you're facing scarcity, the advice from these texts is often to stay faithful in small things and remember that seasons change under what these sources call God's hand. To maybe anchor your daily efforts, you can start your workday with a brief reflection or prayer, something like, "Grant me power for profit and enduring purpose," echoing that spirit of Deuteronomy 8:18. For little by little wins, maybe skip the lottery mindset and instead automate microsaves, perhaps using one of those 5-day roundup apps, tracking with Proverbs 13:11's wisdom. When your goods grow, perhaps do a periodic resource audit. List your expenses, your resources. Are they what these sources might call purpose multipliers, like investing in education, mentorship, meaningful experiences, or vanity vacuums, like impulse buys for fleeting satisfaction? Think of it as an Ecclesiastes 5.11 inspired check. As an attention shift exercise, maybe try redirecting one love of money urge weekly, perhaps trading 15 minutes of obsessive stock checking for 15 minutes of quiet reflection, or reading something meaningful, recalling Matthew 6.21 about where your treasure is.
This deep dive has truly challenged a lot of conventional wisdom about wealth and success, hasn't it? It invites us to see beyond just our immediate efforts to maybe a larger, more profound truth about what these sources describe as divine sovereignty and faithful stewardship.
Yeah, from this perspective, our ultimate purpose isn't necessarily found in achieving equal outcomes with everyone else, but in faithful service within our individual capacities as allocated to us.
So remember, you can hustle on, absolutely, but these sources provoke us to consider. Hustle heavenward, perhaps, as these texts challenge us. Is your legacy going to be a fragile sandcastle built merely for show, or maybe a lighthouse whose enduring light guides and serves others? What's your next thoughtful action after hearing these ideas today?